Hi, Chloe.
Hi, Josh.
I'm excited to chat with you today. You are someone who is kind of on the forefront of, I think, what is possible or what is becoming possible with non alcoholic beverage and the ways that, like, kind of techniques and flavors can be applied. Definitely somebody that I look up to in that regard with recipes and what they're bringing to the table. So I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about you and hear your story.
Very excited to be here. Thank you.
Start me off by telling me, what do you love about the hospitality industry?
Oh, gosh. So, I have been in this industry for my entire life. My first restaurant job, I was 14. So, that's now been 20 years. I've spent more time in this industry than outside of it. I think that when I first got into the industry, I was, coming from a creative background, I really loved the creativity. I loved being able to express myself, especially I think when it comes to, when I first got into bartending, making drinks, making menus, things like that. And then as that progressed and as I stepped into beverage management, I honestly really fell in love with the people. People I work with, my, teams I've led, and also, guests, customers. It's truly been uh, a lifelong journey for me. Both of my dads are chefs, so I've come from a long lineage of hospitality and food and beverage background. So it felt very natural to have this be my career path. And then, yeah, just falling in love with the people, the community it's provided.
What do you wish you could change about the hospitality industry?
Maybe not change, but maybe see more of. I think the community aspect. I see it heading in the right direction. I think that there's a lot more community than there was when I first started out. And that has also kind of transpired into, how I've approached sobriety. I think that we're heading in the right direction. I think that people are taking, a more mindful approach to, especially post pandemic. Like, people are checking in with each other. People are, you're seeing employers take mental health more. A mental health day is a sick day. And I think that there's a lot of programming that's out there and available now that wasn't 10 years ago with, a sense of community. I hope to see that trend continue. So I wouldn't necessarily change, but I'm hoping to see more.
Spoken like a true leader. Where would you say that your journey with sobriety started?
I have been sober for a year and a half now, but was sober curious for about 3 years leading up to that. And I think that was me trying to gain a sense of control over what was a problem. I think that, again, speaking of kind of just like the old, uh, earlier days, working in bars, working, where it's very encouraged, the camaraderie around it is, drinking is encouraged, whether that's like a shift drink after after work, you clock out, you immediately go to the other side of the bar. Or I mean, even convention, Tales of the Cocktail, Portland Cocktail Week. I think that, growing up and learning how to bartend in a very beverage focused, work hard, play harder mentality definitely took its toll. Um, I 2 summers ago, kind of had been dealing with some intense personal things where, the party wasn't a party anymore. It was just getting very, very sad. And all of the reasons that I had previously, imbibed and chosen to drink were not reasons anymore. It wasn't blowing off steam. It wasn't, getting drinks with coworkers afterwards. It was turning into something that was problematic. And I kind of took inventory of my life and all of the things that were in it, really was waiting for that rock bottom moment. I was waiting for a DUI or waiting to lose my job or get arrested or lose my relationship or have friends walk out on me. And none of it really happened. And I kind of had hidden that for such a long time. Really taking inventory of my life and realizing, like, I have a lot of great things and I love my job. I love my partner. I love my friends, my family, and nothing bad has happened. And why hasn't it happened? And why am I making myself miserable? And really, like, the last night that I went out drinking was just any night. I grabbed drinks with coworkers. It, turned into 4 a.m. pretty quickly. And the next morning I woke up and I was like, it needs to stop. I'm done. I did voluntarily check myself into treatment. I think that the way I kind of handle things is I need to be a little bit more definitive with how I handle things. So I think that with the intense personal stuff that I was kind of dealing with, rehab to me was more of like a need for therapy and kind of mental treatment than it was really for, weaning myself off of alcohol or any kind of detox program.
Mhm.
I am fortunate that my family is Native American, so there are a lot of like resources to genetically predisposed people. So I was able to actually seek treatment through my tribe, which I know that a lot of people don't have access to. I was very, very fortunate to have access to that. In seeking treatment, learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about kind of sobriety, but really learned a lot about my culture and kind of my history and genetic trauma and genetic, breaking the cycle and everything. So it was honestly, uh, I'm really glad that I chose that route to get sober. It was, I think, I was the only person in treatment that was there voluntarily. Everybody else was there via court order or via family intervention. So I was a little unique in that standpoint, but I am so glad that I did that. It honestly, I think that it gave me a lot of tools of with how I've kind of like dealt with and spoken about and kind of healed in the last year and a half. So I'm really glad that that is the route that I took.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. I want to jump back a little bit. You mentioned being sober curious for 3 years. What about sobriety were you curious of in that time?
I think just a lot of it was trying to figure out if I did have a problem. I think it was a sober October. It was a dry January. I used to live and work in Austin, Texas, and South. If you know Austin, South by Southwest pretty much dominates the entire month of March. And so I'd always take March off of drinking. So I was always doing like these long stints of taking time off of drinking. Sometimes it would be a month. Sometimes it would be three, six. And then it was kinda the snap back around of, immediately, going into party mode afterwards. It was, counting down. I was always doing, "Okay, day 29, in 3 days I can drink again." I've also done, like, done 75 hard. Okay, like, it's day 74, tomorrow I can cut loose, I can reward myself. Um, I think that that was more so, like, convincing myself like, "Oh, I can take off, 3, 2, 3, 6 months off of drinking and I'm fine." I think that in my early 20s when I was doing that, I think I was fine. I think that a decade of this industry and doing that, was no longer working. So, I mean, the last year before I decided to stop drinking for good, I had already taken 6 months off of drinking and then spent an entire summer after that absolutely poisoning myself, with partying. So, it wasn't helping because for how great I felt when I was taking those breaks, I was not feeling great when I was snapping back.
Yeah, I can totally relate. I mean, that really sounds like a mirror of like my own situation. Yeah, I would take that time off as well, but it was like it's almost like with a magician, like you're looking at the wrong thing. What was actually would make a change would be if I paid attention to the time when I was drinking, but I put all of my focus and energy into like, see, you can do this. You went a month, you went X amount without doing this. So you're good, which that I use as well because I had never done that before. I took a sober October, and at the end of it, like I too took inventory. I actually paid attention to the way that I was feeling with alcohol removed from my system. And I thought about like my relationships. I thought about like the way that I looked and felt. And like that is what helped kind of like spark what is now almost 9 years. And it just like, it feels crazy to have gotten it wrong for so long.
But we're here now.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So what was that transition like for you out of treatment? I guess my first question is, did you find what you were looking for in treatment as far as therapy? It sounds like you learned a lot more about yourself and how did you begin to exit that program?
If I'm being honest, it was very scary at the time. I was in a full shame spiral of, how did I get here? What did what led me to this place? I did probably more shame spiraling than I needed to. And when I got out, was very, very private about where I had been for a month. And then also, uh, I was still going out, with coworkers and people after work and friends and, hiding it. Uh, Very much the soda with a lime, it could be a drink, it could not. I think I was very, closed off for the first few months. People very close to me, knew that I was sober, and people really close to me knew that I had been in treatment, but I was not ready to share my story. I was still very much figuring out, like, almost in the mentality of, like, this is another break. I don't know if I'm going to snap back again. And at this point, now that I've openly admitted in therapy and group sessions and to a lot of people in my native community that I am an alcoholic, now it's not a snapback, it's a relapse, and was very, very scared of that word. And so, for a very long time, I kept that very, very close to my chest. Just because the first year I think of sobriety, no matter how you come to find it, is a very pivotal year of like what this means. Um, I was worried to fail. So I kept it hidden for a very long time, partially out of self shame and partially out of insecurity. And then what's funny is I remember in my final sessions before I graduated from treatment, I remember just crying and being so beside myself about people finding out and being so worried that it would discredit lead a beverage team to work in beverage. I was really worried about fear of judgment from my peers at work. And what's funny is the week I returned from treatment, not a single person asked me where I had been. I mean, a few people were like, "I'm so glad you're back," but it almost was like I was so worried about what people cared. And then I got back to real life and back to hanging out with acquaintances and, drinking buddies and things like that, and not a single person batted an eye. And so all of that thought and worry and, like, shame that I had built up in my chest, then it was like the opposite where I was like, "Oh, well, wait, I kind of do want you to ask me where I was and what I was doing, and maybe I do wanna talk about this, and maybe I do want to share my story." So it was a really, kind of full circle moment of just, feeling all of this internalized guilt about it, and then just realizing it was all just me, which again, I feel like sobriety and recovery in a nutshell, but really seeing that like play out in real time was quite shocking.
What did it take to come out? How did it feel?
I think it's like holding a secret, you tell a couple people and then you tell a few more and then you tell a few more and then all of a sudden it's a random person that you don't super know well at work coming up to you and saying like, "Hey, I heard you're sober. I have questions about it." Or I utilized my close friend story a lot during that time, but then started posting, a few of like the larger milestones, like, okay, now I'm 6 months sober, now I'm 10 months sober. I'm posting that on my main story and having people reach out and DM me that I didn't even, random acquaint. It started small and then it got larger of kind of sharing and it's been really, eye-opening because I think that, had I had that when I was questioning, I might have either come to the realization sooner or had less shame or guilt knowing that there are a lot of people in this community that are either questioning it or struggling. So talking about it has been weirdly, healing for myself too.
Yeah. Yeah, I realized when I started talking about it, I was developing vocabulary that I didn't have before. And while, especially with this show, I mean, that's a bulk of like where I'm able to chat with so many individuals that, our stories don't always align. They're not always exactly the same. Like I'm really fortunate in what we get to share in, but I hear little pieces of my story in everybody else's. And it's really kind of like helped form vocabulary in a way of talking about it that I don't know that I would accurately be able to express the way that I am or feel if it weren't for like having so many other stories like reflected back to me and being able to share with so many folks. What does your support community look like now, and how do you interact with them?
It's a little bit piecemeal. Because I sought treatment with the tribe in Michigan. I'm based and located in Chicago, so I don't get to go to group very often. I try to go once a month, which is now kind of turned into once every other month. Now I've been on the road for the last 3 months, so I haven't gone in a while. But I have found, honestly, a community within my close friends and coworkers. Around the same time that I decided to stop drinking, I had a couple other coworkers that also reached that same decision. So weirdly, working with individuals that were also, and they reached that decision in a different way. And I'm not there to, try to explain their story because it's personal to them. But going through that with them at the same time was very helpful. My younger sister is also sober. My best friend is sober and actually decided to stop drinking about 6 months before I did. So I've weirdly built a community, not on purpose, but I am surrounded by a lot of sober individuals that have weirdly kind of come into fruition in the last year, the last 2 years that I didn't have before. And that has been extremely helpful. Uh, Being able to reach out and, talk to on the phone, send a funny meme, even, a late night call if, I'm struggling to my sister or to my friend. It's been very helpful, but again, it's like not something that I really had even 5 years ago when I was really in the thick of struggling. I also think that sharing about my sober journey with individuals that have been close to me, I think has helped a lot of people kind of reach that decision themselves, and that's kind of helped build a community. So I've been very fortunate that I have a micro community of sober individuals.
Yeah, that's great. What are those conversations like with your friends and your sister? I've got a couple people in my life that it's really interesting to think about the way that I talk about it now with them, because I feel like in when I made the decision like early on, I almost didn't know how to talk to them. Like I didn't know what parts I wanted to say. I didn't have like everything figured out for myself. And now it's, sometimes sobriety is funny. And, you referenced memes, like it's kind of making fun of myself, making fun of a situation, but that I can just easily transition into those like heart to heart, like, I'm so glad you're in my space sort of thing, and just kind of all encompassing. But what do conversations sound like with the sober folks in your life?
Honestly, like normal conversations. I think the biggest thing I was worried about when I first got sober was that I would be treated or looked at differently. And I'm sure a lot of people also kind of like mirror that feeling. Those conversations don't necessarily revolve around sobriety, but they do they're normal conversation. They make me feel normal. Or, sometimes it's a quick text interaction with a friend. It's like, hey, I'm going to my first concert sober. And have you been to a concert sober yet? Like, what did you do? How did you feel? Like, how much Red Bull did you drink? Uh, so, I think that it's a lot of my sober journey has kind of been rewiring my brain and still like I am still fun. I do still enjoy things. I do still like to go to concerts, to bars, uh to conventions, to things that are very drinking focused, and being able to kind of like rely on or just ask people like, how did you deal with that? My job is in beverage, so I'm a little bit different than some of the people in my sober community where I have to be around alcohol 20. It's not something that I can avoid or be afraid of. And I'm still very involved in, actively like having to be around even drunk people or a potentially triggering situation. So being able to lean on that community and or, take a back seat or, step off to the side, send a quick text to a friend has been very, very helpful.
What have you come to appreciate about yourself now? Who do you think has kind of like grown from this?
I think that I when I was in treatment, I had to write a list of things that I liked about myself. And the first thing I put on the list, I was rereading my notes from treatment to prepare for this interview. The first thing I wrote that I was stubborn and that I really liked that about myself. And which is kind of funny. But I think stubbornness has really helped me. I'll be damned if I drink again. I think stubbornness has really carried me through this. And I would say now, a year and a half in, what does that look like? I'm not as hard-headed as I was. I was very, very determined those first 6 honestly, the first year, of really determined to avoid relapse. Not that I was afraid that I was going to, but just really determined on, you know, what that would mean and, personally, would that mean being a failure? Kind of turning that stubbornness into a positive, trying to, see, it's not a failure, but, like, realizing that, being hard-headed really carried me through the first, few months of sobriety, and then what that hard-headedness looks like now, and it's softened a lot. And actually, I was listening to the second Josh Harris, interview that you guys did where, I'm probably going to bungle the quote, but, "Are you kind to the version of yourself that needed to get sober?" And that quote has really stuck with me, and I wasn't kind for a very long time, and now kind of, like, looking at that version of myself with, like, a much softer lens and, almost like an out-of-body experience, like, those are 2 different people, and the person that needed to get sober needed love and needed care and needed to be told that it's okay. So I think that that hard-headedness and stubbornness has definitely softened a lot, and, I'm very proud of that and very, grateful that I've had time to kind of soften my edges a little bit, surrounding how I feel and think about sobriety.
Yeah, how does it feel to kind of sit in that softness? Because I know what you mean, and I feel like in the beginning you almost need that hard-headedness for that self-preservation, like, you need that force to kind of, like, carry through. It's almost like, if you're on a tough hike and it starts raining and you're like, "We need to carry on for a few more miles, and then I know that we're gonna get to, like, a safe zone where, the rain won't get us as much," and you can finally kind of, like, unpack and build your fire and calm into the moment a little bit more. And then in that calmness even comes the reflection of the hard-headedness of, like, the survivor that had to kind of, like, push through. And I feel like I used to view them as separate people as well, but it's whereas in the past, I feel like it would have been almost I don't know, it's almost like a tow rope situation. I feel like the survivor, the hard-headed person carried this gentle person in, and now the reins have been shifted. And now my softer, more kind version is holding and nestling the hard-headed version. And as a way of kind of like showing, like, look how far we've made it. Look at what we have now. How does it feel to kind of sit in your own softness of this moment? And what do you see?
I love sitting in the soft era right now. It feels much deserved mentally to kind of give myself grace of, here, and there's always still work to do. There's always, what does 2 years look like, 3 years, 4, a decade? And it's nice to reflect back and say, we can breathe for a second. And knowing that that hard-headed, determined person is still in me, and I've taken that and applied to multiple I'm knowing that I am capable of hard things, and, I mean, in the last 2 years, this has been the hardest thing I've dealt with, and how do I apply that determination to other facets of my life? And, it's definitely a walk, don't run right now, and it has been for the last 2 years, but just, being able to apply that to anything, to things that are scary, to obstacles at work, to things going on personally with my family, with my friends. How I deal with grief has been a big one. Uh, Very grateful to be in that softness right now, but knowing that that determined part of me still exists and that I can use when I need. It's weird. I think admitting that I needed help was almost harder than actually stopping drinking. Again, I had gone very, very long periods of time not imbibing, and it's like making a doctor's appointment. The hardest part is actually making the appointment. It's not going.
Yeah.
So I've kind of applied that to there's other, and it can be anything from stupid, like folding laundry or, calling my mom or things that are, that you put off. I can kind of almost like bully myself into like, okay, I made the hard decision. I can make the easy decisions now.
Yeah, I like that. What do you do with your time? that removing alcohol gave you back?
Honestly, a lot of the same stuff. I think that I'm still, again, I'm a very social person. I still like to go out, and I still like to go to, go to bars, visit people, go to shows. I'm a big lover of food and hospitality. I said earlier, I grew up in it, so it's a lot of my same interests and hobbies are there, but now I remember them, or now I actually enjoy them. It took a minute to kind of get to that point. I think that the dopamine that alcohol provides, I didn't have anymore. So a good friend of mine calls it location fatigue. I get very bored very fast at especially industry events. I'm very much, before was me trying to do a one and done and then staying out till 4 in the morning. It truly is a one and done. The one is an NA beverage. I'm saying, high circling the room, and then I am out by 45 minutes.
Yeah,
Uh, but I'm also able to make it to, 4, 5, 6 events, especially I have Mondays off, which are typically the service industry days that, um, people have so, I'm making it to every single event, I'm remembering every interaction, and then I'm home in bed, by 10 p.m., which is it's been, professionally, it's been very nice. I feel like I've done a lot more actual networking than previously. I think, before I called it networking, but it was just kind of
yeah,
drunken hangs at, Tales of the Cocktail, at Aaron Rowe. That's not networking. That's just,
being there.
it's 9 a.m., I'm at Aaron Rowe's and I ran into 5 industry homies. So it feels good to, be still showing up for people and still showing up for bars and friends that I support, but actually having those interactions be, I mean, at least more meaningful to me. And it's still people that then there's no judgment for the people that are still very much imbibing and part of that, or people that don't struggle with it, or, God bless the people that are not afflicted with alcoholism that can go to all these events and truly do with the one and done and still, keep it together. But yeah, it feels nice to still be able to do all that and maintain my composure.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like I didn't have to like put rules on myself. Everything just kind of like came naturally. Like the things that I discovered is like my rev up time takes a lot longer than it used to, and my curfew is a lot earlier than it used to be.
Yeah. Very much the curfew. And I like
Yeah.
having I didn't think I would like having a curfew. I was even in college, before I got into bartending, I mean, I was always the last one standing. Even as a kid, I was the last awake at the sleepover. I never wanted the party to stop, whatever that
Mhm.
party was. And it feels nice to kind of set that boundary and have that curfew and come home, make myself food, and go to bed.
Yeah. That's a great feeling. Talk to me a little bit about where you pull influence, how you drive technique, how you become creative within the non-alcoholic drink space.
So, I oversee beverage for the Alinea Group, but my main home is the Aviary. So that's my office. That's where I go to work every day. I was very lucky to have already inherited an incredibly renowned and robust beverage program when I started. I've been with the group for 4 years, going on 5, and was a longtime fan before I had started. Had all the books. I had the Zero book. So I was really fortunate that I had already inherited such a well-established program. The first 2 years that I was working there, it was kind of, I don't wanna say rinse and repeat, but a lot of it was upholding pre-established standards and pre-established, kind of approaches to how we did the NA program. So we at the Aviary have a full list of non-alcoholic drinks that completely mirror the regular drinks on the menu. They look, taste, feel exactly the same. I guess the thought process is to where if you are NA and don't want the rest of the table to know, you can have a drink that looks exactly the same. It's very under the radar. Uh, we also do full NA pairings that mirror the wine pairings at the other restaurants. And those are a little bit more creative in the sense where those drinks aren't necessarily non-alcoholic wine. There's a little bit more creative liberty with that. But again, I think that I had already kind of come into pre-established techniques and steps of service of how we approached those menus, that it was a very easy formula to follow. I didn't put a lot of thought into it in the sense of like the why. I did put a lot of thought into what they, this is not discrediting drinks I have put up or menus that I have put up, but I didn't really put a lot of thought into the why. Or what they might mean to a person until I got sober. I think it was very much like I'm putting up a menu. The fact that there is no alcohol in this, to me, it's very much the same. It's like, okay, it's springtime. We got to come up with a new menu. Next is doing a new menu. We need to come up with 9 non-alcoholic drinks. And it was very much like business as usual. I think now looking at the program with a sober lens and how I want to drink when I'm out, and also what that might mean to a sober individual, it's been very, very life changing in the way of my approach. I've thought a lot more about like the why than really the drink. So I think that while I still following a lot of the same formulas of menu composition, I think thinking a lot about why we do what we do and how important it is, and how inclusive it is kind of where that resonates with me more. I am currently in Montana. We're doing a 4-month residency at a ski resort, and we had to do an NA menu and a spirit on the cocktail list. And then we also did an non-alcoholic pairing in educating that team, because it wasn't just Alinea Group employees, it was also resort employees and people that weren't uh, really knowledgeable as to, how we do menu flips, but also weren't really as knowledgeable of like how we approach NA. And it was really, really awesome being able to speak to that as a sober person and put up a menu that felt very intentional. Again, flavor wise was, it's an Alinea group. It's still delicious, but being able to speak to it and being able to say like, this is why I'm doing this. This is why this is important. Talking about dietary restrictions. One, my favorite food blogs. She's based out of Minneapolis. The blog's name is Beyond Beurre Blanc. She put up a really, really good article over the summer, basically saying like, when are restaurants going to treat non-alcoholic restrictions the same as we would treat a dietary restrictions? Like, why aren't we taking this as seriously as a nut allergy or a shellfish allergy? Because, for some people, accidentally getting served a drink isn't a big deal, but for others it is. And knowing that now as a sober person, as someone that's been in treatment, I know how important that is. And educating our staff on, making sure that if a table is, if one guest out of 4 is NA, we know from top to bottom, and we treat it as seriously as a shellfish allergy. You could kill someone or send someone to the hospital with a shellfish allergy. Alcohol is the same, and you don't know, and it's not our place to decipher where people are at in their choice for NA. Zero proof, zero judgment, but it is our job to uphold that with as much seriousness as possible. And even if it isn't that serious for that individual, it's not our place to discern whether it is or isn't. And you wouldn't ask somebody with a shellfish allergy how serious their allergy is. You just don't serve them shellfish.
Yeah.
If someone's choosing not to imbibe that evening, you don't accidentally serve them alcohol. Uh, that's also changed with kind of my approach to how we do the NA menu at the Aviary, because before it was like it needs to look, taste, feel, smell, look exactly like the regular drinks, down to the name. And there's been a few times where we've accidentally, because the name is the same, we've accidentally brought a guest a drink that quickly rectified the situation. How do we make that more of a definitive marker while still maintaining somebody's you know anonymity with where they're at? We get a lot of pregnant people that might not be out pregnant, so that's usually the reason why we try to keep it as the same. But now I'm looking at that with a sober lens of like, how do we treat this as, with as much thought and care and attention to detail, but make sure that we're not accidentally serving somebody? How do we treat the menus where somebody is getting a full experience, someone's doing a tasting menu, they can't have wine. Whether that's a wine allergy or not, and they're spending the money, how do we make sure that they have a full experience and creating that value in there? So it's really, really changed my perspective with kind of how I approach menus now. I don't think the formula has changed. I think we have an incredible beverage team, an incredible prep team behind what we do here. It's nice to have a full team of people that can implement these menus. But I think the way that I approach them is very different.
What advice do you have for somebody looking to start a program that, doesn't have the sober lens that you have? How do you explain the why to somebody like that?
I think it comes down to mindfulness. And I think that that's the first question you asked me is what I love about hospitality. Hospitality is mindfulness. I think that if you want to say, if you're a chef and are passionate about food, you should be just as passionate about beverage. Same as if you're a server front of house and the way that you describe things tableside, like the amount of attention to detail that you had for your level 1 wine test, you should for the NA program. It comes down to mindfulness, and it's very easy to do without needing to go through all of the hardships of getting sober if that's not your journey. Like I mean, this can be an argument also just applied to beverage in general, and I love to see that the way the industry has taken a lot more of a serious approach to beverage in the last 10 years than it has previously. But there's still so much room for that to go. But yeah, it comes down to mindfulness 100%.
What do you think the NA space is missing?
I think that again, I don't think the space is missing anything. I think we are heading in the right direction as far as community. And I think that I'll just answer this more personal instead of generalized. I would have loved to see someone in my similar position when I was questioning getting sober. I would have loved to see somebody that was insecure, worried, thinking that, all the times that I was questioning, like, do I have a problem? Is this a problem? Or do I just, am I just doing what everyone else does? Going out, partying, having a good night. I would like to see a lot more open and honest conversations. I don't, whether that's large or small scale. I think that I would have loved to have that when I was questioning myself. And a big part of me wanting to even reach out to you and jump on this podcast was, if one person can find my story relatable, that's helpful. And I think like a lot of the internalized shame and guilt, I think that people being honest about that would help a lot. I do know several sober individuals that I've found out since I've gotten sober did go through a treatment process. At the time that I was questioning going to treatment, I didn't know a single person that had gone to treatment for alcoholism. I knew a lot of people that were sober and very successful, and you know, decades deep, and that feels very overwhelming in early sobriety and very unrelatable. It's hard, especially how vulnerable you are when you're first admitting that you might have a problem. It's hard to see someone with 10 years under their belts telling you that it's going to be okay, and it's like, well, yeah, but I can't see myself in 10 years. I can't see myself in a week. So knowing, I think that from my perspective, I would have loved to have known people that have been in a similar situation. I think larger scale, I don't know if that is, what the industry needs, but that's what I needed. Relatability is huge. I think that we're in an era with social media and with the way that bartending and awards and top 50 and there's a lot of co-comparison within our industry. And I think that that's very motivating, but it's also very hindering and very restrictive when you are struggling. So it's hard to see very successful individuals when you're in a dark space, uh, and imagine yourself, on the other side of that. I think that when I hit a year, I was like the months leading up to it, I was so excited to hit my 1 year. And then when I did, I almost like collapsed in on myself. Um, I written in my notes app a long Instagram post, and I was so excited to be like, I've made it. I made it a year. I'm ready to talk about it. And, when the time actually came around, I was like, I overthought it. I was like, "I don't know if this is performative. I don't know if this is too much. I don't know if I'm oversharing, if I'm, or if this is gonna scare somebody." Or, like, this sometimes the success stories are, almost keep people away from wanting to try things themselves, and I decided against it. I didn't post, and I don't regret not posting about it, but I do have feelings about it now, several months later, where, maybe I was a little too in my head about it, but I've been in my head about it this whole time. I think that, sorry, this is a very long answer to your question. Relatability, I think, is the biggest thing that this industry needs because there are these huge figureheads where it seems like it's unattainable. And, you know, like advertisements for, like, sign up for world class. This could be you one day. And it's like, could it? Could it? It just seemed some of the success stories just, like, create this, this fear or this anxiety where you wanna clamp up, and I've definitely kind of, like, dealt with that with my sober journey, and, yeah, I would like to see more relatability. I would like to see more kind of open, honest no matter how small that circle is, whether that's, in person on, even a close friend story. I'm not, not advocating for people to share something they're not comfortable with, but it would be a lot easier, I think, for people that are struggling to hear that others are. And I mean, just if you look at my DMs, like there are a lot of people, and it's people that aren't out and aren't openly admitting that they're struggling. But yeah, I think it would be very helpful.
What are you most proud of right now?
I think that I am most proud that I get to share my story, that I get to talk about it, that I've reached a point where I am not scared about talking about my sober journey. Again, no matter how small, I have people, come up to talk to me every day at work about, I'm thinking about taking a break off, I'm thinking about taking this month off of drinking. And whether or not that person has a problem or doesn't, that's awesome. And being able to be like a support for coworkers or friends or individuals has helped me in more ways than I ever knew. And if I could tell the person a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that I would be at this point in my sobriety where I would be openly talking about a podcast. I don't know if I would believe myself. So I think I'm most proud of being able to be honest. And it's taken me a very long time to get there. And there's still a lot of work to go, but I think that, yeah, my ability to be honest is the thing I'm the most proud of.
I think that's great. I'm really proud of you, Chloe. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.